All right, you bastards, buckle up for our deep dive.
Hmm.
We're going headfirst into that shitstorm that is European ethnicity. Yeah. You know all those fairy tales about noble knights and princesses and shit?
Right.
Forget that bullshit. European history. It's a goddamn bloodbath. Invasions, migrations,
Oh, yeah.
enough intermingling to make your family tree look like a tangled-ass vine. And we're going to unpack all that crap. This Wikipedia article on ethnic groups in Europe is our guide.
Well, you're not wrong about that tangled mess. It's fascinating, really. This whole idea of a pure European bloodline, complete horseshit.
Okay, so let's cut the crap. How the hell did this whole European ethnicity thing even start? Did some ancient drunkard just draw some fucking lines on a map?
Not quite, but it's not that far off. This article mentions Japhetites. Like, everyone in Europe descended from Noah's son Japheth.
Oh, for fuck's sake. So those ancient asshats tried to make a shared origin story based on some biblical bullshit.
Didn't need much.
They were seriously reaching, trying to find common ground among Europeans.
Yeah.
Like herding pissed off cats.
It's just not going to happen. But this melting pot thing, you're saying Europe has always been a mix of different people.
Absolutely. Even before recorded history, waves of migration shaped the genetics of the continent. There's this geneticist, David Reich, a real brainiac. He's done some groundbreaking research on ancient genomes. Get this, his work shows modern Europeans, a blend of at least 4 different ancestral groups.
Hit me with the deets. Who are these ancestors?
We're talking Western hunter-gatherers, Eastern hunter-gatherers. Then you've got your Neolithic Levant.
Neolithic what?
Or Natufians.
Fuck.
Try saying that after a few beers. And then Neolithic Iranians. All these groups were mixing it up, creating what we now call European.
So anyone listening who thinks they're 100% whatever the hell European ethnicity, they're full of shit.
Very much.
Yeah.
Everyone's family tree is probably way more complicated than they think.
Family reunion nightmare. Okay, let's move on. Language. How the fuck does language factor into all this? Well, language is often seen as a marker of identity. And Europe. It's a linguistic clusterfuck of epic proportions. So many different language families in this small continent.
Don't sugarcoat it. Just give it to us straight.
You've got the Indo-European family. That includes Germanic, Romance, and Slavic languages. Then the Uralic, Turkic, and Semitic families, each with their own quirks and complexities. And just to spice things up, you've got these isolated languages like Basque.
Basque sounds like some made-up bullshit.
Oh, it's real and ancient. Linguists believe it might be the last surviving language from before the Indo-European family arrived. It's like a linguistic time capsule. Pretty fascinating, right?
Yeah, sure. Fascinating. Well, let's be real, though. Most people are probably just trying to figure out which language will get them laid in Europe.
Well, that's one way to look at it. But language is about more than just getting laid. It shapes our thoughts, our culture, even our sense of identity.
Okay, enough deep thoughts. Let's talk invasions.
Ah, yes. The fun part. European history is basically one giant free-for-all. Conquering and getting conquered. Ancient badasses like the Phoenicians and Assyrians spreading their influence across the Mediterranean.
Right.
Then you've got the Huns, those barbaric bastards sweeping in from the east, wreaking havoc. And let's not forget the Mongols. Those guys were brutal. It's a miracle Europe even survived.
Yeah, but let's be real. It wasn't just brute force. These invasions led to some serious mixing, right?
Yeah.
Cultural and genetic. It's like every time some asshat conquered Europe, they left a little piece of themselves behind.
Exactly. You can see the impact in the genes of modern Europeans. And it's not just genes. Ideas, languages, customs, all blended together over centuries, creating this complex cultural landscape we see today.
So everyone in Europe is a walking, talking product of centuries of invasion, migration, and general badassery.
That's one way to put it.
Not bad. Right?
Not bad at all. It's a history that's both brutal and beautiful.
Right.
Destructive and creative.
All right, you history nerds out there, time for a little thought experiment. Were your ancestors the conquerors? Or were they getting their asses kicked? Place your bets. But hey, even after all that chaos, the ethnic groups of Europe still managed to emerge, right?
Well, emerge might be a strong word. It was more like a slow and messy process, driven by language, culture, geography, and, of course, politics.
Politics. Oh, for fuck's sake. Just when I thought we were having a good time.
Don't worry, we'll get to the political bullshit later. But for now, let's just say that the idea of distinct ethnic groups in Europe is a lot more fluid and contested than people think. So we're talking about language families, right? An Indo-European, Uralic, all that jazz.
Yeah, a goddamn buffet of bizarre sounds and grammar rules that'll make your head explode.
Well, They're actually tied to those so-called ethnic groups of Europe.
Okay.
Like, language is what tries to hold these slippery-ass identities together.
Okay, that kind of makes sense. People who speak the same lingo probably share some other cultural shit, right?
Yeah.
But wait, didn't you say there were tons of language families in Europe? How do they keep track of all the ethnic groups? It's got to be a goddamn nightmare.
It's definitely not a neat one-to-one relationship. You can't just say, oh, you speak a Germanic language, you must be ethnically German. It's way more complicated than that.
Oh, for fuck's sake. More mind-bending bullshit.
Well, think of it like this. The Indo-European family. It's like a massive tree with a shitload of branches.
Okay.
Germanic, Romance, Slavic, all these big branches. And then you've got even more subdivisions within those branches, like twigs and leaves. It's a linguistic family tree gone wild.
So basically a giant tangled mess, just like everything else in European history. Surprise, surprise.
I wouldn't say it's a mess, more like a complex, ever-evolving tapestry. And even this Wikipedia article doesn't list every single ethnic group. It just focuses on the major ones, Germans, French, Italians, Russians, the ones who usually hog the spotlight.
Typical. Little guys always get screwed. Speaking of which, what about all the minorities in Europe? Do they all just get lumped into these big-ass ethnic groups?
No, they definitely don't. The article talks about indigenous and non-indigenous minorities. It's like Europe has this weird history of both excluding and absorbing different groups. A real fucked up family dynamic, if you ask me.
They can't decide if they want to celebrate diversity or squash it? One giant identity crisis.
That's a pretty accurate assessment. You've got indigenous minorities who've been in Europe for centuries, like the Sami up north, the Basques in Spain and France, and the Romani, who are spread out all over the continent. They've all faced a lot of shit. Discrimination, marginalization.
Damn. Sounds like Europe has a lot of skeletons in its closet. But hey, at least they have that framework convention for the protection of national minorities, right?
Yeah, they do. It's supposed to protect the rights of these minority groups. Sounds good on paper, right? But guess what? Some countries, like France, they haven't even signed it.
What a bunch of hypocritical assholes. They love preaching about human rights to everyone else. But when it comes to protecting their own people, suddenly they get all squeamish.
It definitely raises some questions about their commitment to those rights.
So they're saying diversity is great as long as it doesn't make us uncomfortable. Bullshit.
Well, it's a complex issue. There are a lot of factors at play. Historical, cultural, and political.
Oh, for fuck's sake, not politics again. Can't we just talk about medieval torture devices or something?
I'm afraid politics is unavoidable when we're talking about ethnicity and identity.
Fine, but if we start talking about Brexit, I'm out of here.
Don't worry, we'll steer clear of that shit show. But we do need to talk about this whole concept of European identity. It's something that's been debated for centuries, still as slippery and elusive as ever.
Yeah, good luck trying to pin that one down. It's like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. You got all these different cultures, languages, religions, and historical baggage all crammed into one continent. How do you even define what it means to be European? Mind-boggling.
You're right, it's a challenging concept. And this article highlights how these attempts to define European identity are often tied to politics.
Ugh, politics again. I swear it's a goddamn plague.
Well, think about it. Throughout history, leaders have used this idea of a shared European identity to try and unify people, often for their own selfish reasons.
Like starting wars.
Exactly. Even today, you see politicians and intellectuals grappling with this question. What does it mean to be European? Is it about shared values, shared history, geography?
Who the hell knows? And frankly, who the hell cares? Let people identify how they want.
Well, it's not always that simple.
Why not?
Because identity is powerful. It shapes our sense of belonging, our worldview, our relationships. And in a world that's increasingly interconnected, this question of who are we is becoming more and more important.
All right, Professor, you've officially lost me. My brain is fried. I need a drink.
I think that's a good idea. We've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, from ancient genomes to modern-day identity politics. Enough to make anyone's head spin.
But hopefully it's also sparked some curiosity.
Curiosity. More like confusion. And a strong desire for a stiff drink. But hey, that's what this show is about, right? Challenging our assumptions, expanding our knowledge, and having a few laughs along the way.
Exactly. It's about embracing those complexities, recognizing that there are rarely easy answers.
Well said, Professor. Now, where's that goddamn bottle opener? We've got some serious debriefing to do. Okay, so we've talked about the history, the languages, the invasions, and that whole identity clusterfuck. But what the hell does the future hold for Europe? Is it just going to keep morphing into some bizarre hybrid? Or will it finally implode under the weight of its own contradictions?
Well, predicting the future is a fool's game, right? But this article hints at some potential trends. For one thing, migration isn't slowing down. People are still coming to Europe from everywhere.
So that means the whole idea of distinct European ethnicities is going to become even more meaningless. Good riddance, I say. Let the melting pot boil over. But what about those indigenous minorities we talked about? The Sami, the Basques, the Romani. Are they just going to get swallowed up?
That's a valid concern. The article highlights those challenges, especially when it comes to preserving languages and cultures.
Right.
They're caught between a rock and a hard place,
Yeah.
trying to hold on to their traditions, but also adapt to this globalized world.
It's a tough spot to be in. It's like they're being asked to assimilate, but also keep their identities. Not exactly a fair deal. And don't forget all that hypocrisy we talked about. Some European countries talking all that shit about human rights while they're failing to protect their own minorities.
You're right. It's complex and contradictory. On the one hand, there's a push for integration and a unified European identity. On the other hand, you've got these deeply rooted cultural differences and historical grievances that aren't easily erased.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster. All these different groups crammed together, vying for resources and recognition. Sounds like a powder keg waiting to explode.
Well, it doesn't have to be that way. Diversity can be a strength. But it takes work to foster understanding, respect, and a sense of shared purpose, finding ways to bridge those cultural divides, and build a society that values inclusivity without sacrificing individual identities.
Okay, Professor Albite, how the hell do we do that? What's the magic formula for this harmonious, multicultural utopia?
There's no magic formula. It takes a lot of hard work, open communication, and a willingness to confront some uncomfortable truths about our past and present. It also requires a shift in perspective, moving away from this us versus them and recognizing that we're all part of the same human family, even if we don't always speak the same language or share the same customs.
Sounds like a tall order. But hey, if Europe can survive centuries of invasions and all that other shit, maybe they can figure out how to live together in peace.
There's always hope. And change is the only constant, right? So who knows what the future holds? Maybe Europe will surprise us and become the shining example of multicultural harmony.
Yeah.
Or maybe it'll all go to shit.
Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, it's going to be one hell of a ride. All right, you bastards, that's our deep dive into European ethnicity. We've laughed, we've learned, we probably offended a few people along the way. Hopefully, we've sparked some critical thinking. And maybe even a little hope for the future. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need another drink. Cheers.